Hello, everybody. Hi, Mr. Brown.
They almost said good morning. Good evening, Mr. Martin. It's been a long day. I think it's already morning.
Hello, everyone. I'm losing my voice, so it's going to be one of those nights. Frank knows I was starting to lose it. I have a terrible cough. And yes, I did spill man, God, that looks awful. I have this soda with me. See if I can cover that. It looks terrible. I literally did just walk in the door.
Hello, Data. You're looking all official tonight.
Just in my office, as I often am. I'm always running for office too. Whenever I'm out in public, I'm wearing a suit and tie. I hope to be a state senator in the future.
Yeah, I tried to avoid the Undertaker look that Karen Ann accuses Jonathan Jacobs and myself of.
Yeah, it's my goal that parliamentarians no longer look like undertakers.
I'm trying to get slightly more casual. I at least wear my Jerry Garcia ties, and that's in memory of and in honor of Dr. Mark Feldman.
Well, when I was at that Arizona convention, you weren't there, but this was during the period of the unfortunate events. So I wasn't allegedly on the LNC at that time, but the parliamentarian that was you remember the name, that was retained by Arizona. Oh my goodness. Like, I totally expected him to have driven up in a hearse.
I know his name, but I can't think of it right now. I know him personally.
Yeah, he did not know what to make of me at all.
I served on the National Bylaws Committee with him for 4 years, and it's a good man, but yeah, fairly conservative.
Yeah, like, I don't think he was purposely being unfriendly, but when I walked up to him to shake his hand to say I was the parliamentarian for the Mises Caucus, I had my, Liberty hat on. I was in hot pink, and he was like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
I can believe it.
Yep.
Well, I remember the first time I saw you wearing the crown of the Liberty hat with some kind of a lightsaber. And I think that was 2016 in Orlando, I believe.
I mean, I'm not a member, but Ms. Harlos, I will say that it's perfectly appointed, perfectly coordinated.
Yeah. Oh boy. Just wait till I start going to the National Association of Parliamentarian Conventions. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, you should go. You should go to the one in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's always a matter of funds.
They are fun. Karen, and the main reason for going those that you make so many contacts. You get to know people personally who you can call on anytime. You don't get that from participating in Zoom meetings. Hello, Sylvia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate the invites to the various things that oh God, what's his name?
Jim Slaughter.
Yeah, Jim Slaughter is putting on. I've admired Jim for a long time. I've got his first books.
He's good. Can I ask who's on the phone at 6489?
Dean Rogers.
Oh, Dean Rogers. Okay, thanks.
The last alternate.
I'm trying to sign back into my account. It keeps logging me out for some reason.
Is that Ken with the emergency siren in the background? You're giving me Reason Roundtable flashbacks. Whenever
It was. Sorry.
No worries.
I just actually joined. I'm out of town for work, and I'm actually out to dinner with some folks, and so I just joined to say I would not be coming, and that I hope there's an alternate here that can take my place. I apologize, but I didn't realize that we were going to be out this late. So
You
I
can't
just want to
say
make
you're
sure
not
that,
coming. It's not a contradiction in terms.
well, I came to say that I will not be here for the duration of the meeting. I may join later, probably not. We just got our food. So,
Wayne, close the door.
yes.
Ken, when
So,
I heard the
but-
sirens, I thought, no, listen, I worked my way through law school, part way through law school, working as an ambulance attendant, as an EMT. And I'm thinking, my gosh, is Ken doing double duty as an ambulance attendant also?
No,
No, hasn't
No, that-
anyone heard the reason roundtable? Nick, I mean, I presume they all do it from their home offices, but Nick Gillespie clearly lives adjacent to a fire station. And so every
Yes.
time I
Yeah.
should say half the time they bring him into the conversation, there's a siren going on. It's kind of amusing.
and that is absolutely the truth, and it is hilarious. But anyway, well, folks, have a good meeting. Again, I apologize. I just want to make sure that you all weren't waiting on me. So have a good meeting, and if I can join later, I will. But hopefully, by the time I'm done, you guys will be done. But maybe not. So if I don't talk to you again, I will catch you all at the next meeting.
Enjoy your dinner, Ken.
Ciao, Ken.
Bye.
Bye. Ken moment. Everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, Mr. Brown.
Don't count me. You can list me, but don't count me.
No, I don't. I put you in with the guests.
Do I see Wayne in the background, Karen Ann?
Oof.
By the way, hello, Mike. Sorry I didn't speak to you earlier. Good to see you, or good to see your name anyway.
Hello.
Oh, maybe someone needs to tell Karen Ann she's muted.
Oh, that would be nice. Yeah. Okay, well, I was talking to myself about how I couldn't get my screen to share, but I figured it out now. Okay, now it should be sharing properly with the agenda.
I can see
Basically,
it.
I was just telling you all the story that you didn't get to hear about how I never reboot my computer until it stops working, and I have to because everything is frozen up. And you don't even want to see my desktop. I probably have 1,000 files on it. It is quite nightmare inducing. Okay.
Sounds like my work desktop.
All right. All right. So we're on Libertarian Standard Time, but we are calling to order, trying to translate to Eastern, so it would be at 8. Oh, did I hit record? Is this recording?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's 8:51 Eastern. And Ms. Arrowwood, if you could do the attendance, please.
Sure. Arrowwood, I'm here. Rocco,
Present.
Sizelski,
Here.
Carlos,
Here.
Latham,
Here.
Martin.
Present.
Okay, Mr. Molman declared himself absent. Rowlett. Rufo. Seebeck.
Here.
Okay, I'm going to recall Rowlett, Tom Rowlett. Mike Rufo. Madam Chair, we have 3 absences and 3 alternates are present.
Okay, I didn't, well,
I'm sorry, did you call my name? Did I miss that?
Oh, Chuck Moulton.
Yeah, I'm here, available as an alternate to fill in.
Yeah, I've got you checked off. Rich Tomaso. David Roberson. Greg Deal. Roger Roots. Data Logan.
It is here.
Okay. Dean Rogers.
I'm here.
Good. Thank you. Madam Chair, we have 3 absent from the members, and we have 3 alternatives present.
and who would those 3 be in that are subbing? I know Dr.
Chuck
Moulton.
Moulton, Data Logan, and Dean Rogers.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
We're at the moment for opportunity for public comment, again, as usual. That is for non-committee members, but also committee members who may have something that they wish to address to the committee that really doesn't fall within the agenda. So if you'd wish to speak, if you would use the reactions button and raise your hand, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, seeing none, we will move on. I did not put in a link in the agenda to approval of the prior minutes because there was a comment from Dr. Moulton. I figured this would need to be discussed. And somebody, Nathan Madden, is coming in. So there was a draft, which is more in a transcript format than prior. Dr. Moulton, did you wish to address your
Sure.
comments? Yes.
Yeah, I can address that. Yeah, I apologize. I think maybe I was misunderstood. When I maybe I misspoke. When I mentioned that in an earlier meeting that there were some modifications I would like to see to the minutes, and I wanted to see them more detailed. I didn't mean I wanted to see them this detailed necessarily. Unfortunately, I think that the secretary put an enormous amount of work into this that I'm sorry that I wasted her time by doing my miscommunication. But what I wanted to see, to be clear, is I didn't want to see just the final votes on the final proposals, but I wanted to see amendments that led up to those proposals. So I wanted to see the text of amendments. I didn't necessarily want to see a transcript of all discussion. So that the scope of what I was looking for was more than the previous minutes, but much less than a transcript. So I hope that's clear at this point. And again, sorry for my miscommunication.
sure.
So I'd like to get the sense of the committee if they wish for a redraft of these past minutes. That's more in line with what Dr. Moulton had just described, or whether for this draft only, we wished to approve these with the next ones being in a slightly different format. So I'm leaving that to the committee. If I'm trying to get a sense of where everyone is at with this without yet taking a vote. So don't be shy. Please let me know what everyone is thinking.
Madam Chair, I'd be comfortable either way. I think now the secretary kind of knows what we're looking for future minutes. I didn't want to dump more work into her lap after all the work she put into this. So I wouldn't insist on a redraft. I think the minutes have all the information we need.
Okay, Mr. Latham?
Yeah, and I'm just actually now looking at these for the for the first time. For some reason, I missed them. I mean, this is great in terms of a transcript, but I think that's just asking way too much of our secretary to create something like this for every meeting. So I would be leaning back toward the more abbreviated version. I think we can, maybe there's a happy medium there. Just kind of, I like the idea of maybe having a blow by blow of, proposed amendments and then votes on proposed amendments. But what I'm looking at now just seems way more than would be needed. Although that was a pretty fun meeting, I gotta say, and this kind of captures a lot of that.
Well, I think what everyone's in agreement with is the style of the way the LNC meeting minutes are, and our special rules of order for LNC minutes. We could pull that up, but it's basically every motion gets recorded, but the substance of debate never gets recorded. So the only way we typically differ from Roberts is, Roberts would just say the final motion as amended, which could look completely different than how it was moved. Whereas the LNC special rules of order say each step of progress gets recorded, but debate doesn't get recorded. And the only time any kind of narrative really gets recorded is in perhaps the instance of a ruling of the chair where the explanation of the ruling is given. But what I'm trying to get at now is, are we okay with approving this draft, realizing it's a one-off, and next meeting we'll go to the more condensed style, or do we wish to ask the secretary to redraft these to a more condensed style? That's what I'm trying to get the sense of the committee. Mr. Latham.
I'm just, since I haven't read these minutes, I'll just be abstaining. So, but I don't know that I would necessarily object to the minutes. I just haven't seen them.
Ms. Arrowwood, what is your preference?
It doesn't matter to me. I've been a court reporter, a verbatim court reporter for years. So putting that together was not real time consuming for me. It was just par for the course. I think we should follow Dr. Moulton's idea of just stating the basics and each motion that we vote on, exactly what it is. And even if it's an amendment or a small motion, like, to extend time, put that in. But I think it might be good to know that if ever it's needed, that I would be able to produce verbatim if somebody wanted a particular subject set up that way.
Okay, Mr. Rogers.
Madam Chair, my sense is that the minutes accurately reflect the meeting and that the secretary has a better sense on how to go forward, and that we should deal with the minutes and get into the meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry, I keep having to mute because of a cough. Okay, so I'm going to assume a motion here to approve the last minutes, and I'm going to ask if there's any objection to approving the last minutes, with the understanding that going forward, there will be a more abbreviated version. Mr. Bracco.
Yes, I believe that the secretary had asked for the guests at the last meeting. Were you able to track that down, or do you still need that?
I have some of them, but I didn't know if I had all of them. But I can fill
Sorry,
in what I have.
I'm pushing the wrong buttons here. So I can try to drop names into the chat if that works. I don't know, it's a little clunky, it seems, but
Okay.
if you wanted to add those folks before we were to approve the minutes.
Okay, great.
Okay,
And-
this is what I'm going to do then. We're going to move on from this and we'll approve them next meeting. Everyone, please, if there's comments on the meeting, such as offering to give guest names and things like that, if we can please dispose of this by email, because it's not necessary to do during a meeting. So if it's all right with everyone, I'm withdrawing that assumed motion, as there is information that Mr. Bracco wishes to give. Next meeting, we will approve the draft of last meeting and this meeting. So I'm moving on in the agenda unless there is any objection. So where we were at is the modification of the JC rules, which we spent a long time on last meeting, and I don't mean that in a critical way. I think it was very productive, the amount of time we spent. So pulling up here what was on the screen. So the procedural posture at the conclusion of our last meeting is we had a primary motion with the amendments, which are noted on the screen. We had a substitute motion with the amendments noted on the screen. And the chair took the liberty of including the original language here too, so that the committee could see it. So if I remember correctly, where we had left off was amendments still to the substitute, and I do not believe there were any further, but I wanted to ask if there are further amendments to the substitute motion. The chair will give everyone a moment to look on the screen, refresh their memory. So take a few moments to take a look at where we are at, and please ask any questions if this is at all confusing. Okay, so are there any further amendments to the substitute motion? Mr. Brown, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make a comment that I started to make at the last meeting. I'm not sure if I did make it, regarding the language in the substitute amendment. And I'm not sure, I believe this was proposed by Mr. Seebeck. And it's the part in blue further down. It says, the Judicial Committee may only establish the rules of appellate procedure or amend them when no appeal or request to the Judicial Committee is pending. That could theoretically make it almost impossible to propose new rules. I think the intent is simply that any new rules not apply to any pending cases. And that's very easy to say. That's customary. Just with a sentence that says any new rules adopted, shall take effect or shall not apply to any pending cases. That takes care of it, because there could be one appeal after another filed in different matters, and the Judicial Committee could well go 2 years without being able to propose new rules because various appeals are pending. And I think the intent is that they not be able to change the rules on any particular appeal in midstream. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Seebeck?
Mr. Brown's interpretation of what I had in mind is correct. However, I would point out that the idea of the Judicial Committee being inundated with appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal does not have any semblance of reality, both in historically and otherwise. So I think that's kind of a very facetious argument to make, even though it may be theoretically possible.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. So are there, okay, see Mr. Latham?
I wanted to ask Mr. Brown if I think he was making a point that there was a custom that, a rule would not be retroactively applied. Is that in Roberts, or again, are we just saying that's a custom?
No, I don't think that's in Roberts. I meant just I think generally across the country, that's accustomed, unless it's specified otherwise, new rules generally don't apply, retroactively. But maybe I had a bad choice of words, bad choice of language, but that any new rules would only be prospective and applied only to new cases. And I think with new statutes adopted by the legislature, that's normally the case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And I mean, I may be repeating myself. I think this was discussed at the last meeting. I do think that's an infirmity, and the substitute is not to allow the rules to be amended while an appeal is pending. And I think the primary gives the committee more flexibility to amend the rules. But
Okay, I am going to step in for one moment. Right now, we are on an amendment phase. If there's no amendments to be offered, we can move to debate as to whether or not the substitute shall become the primary. And I think that's what we are treading into. I'd like not to do that out of turn. So are there any further amendments to the substitute?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm just typing it up real quick.
Okay, and just procedurally so that everyone knows, there will be opportunity to amend either of them before we move to decide between the two. But procedurally, where we are at is just looking at the substitute. But if you're looking at the primary and go, I might see something there, we are going to go back to that, just to let everyone know. Oh, I didn't have the chat up if you were typing anything into chat, Mr. Braco.
No, ma'am, I'm typing in Word and I'll paste it when it's done. Apologies for the delay.
And will it be in chat? Is that your intention, Mr. Braco?
If that's
Yes.
allowed.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look for where I can see it. That's all.
I'm going to type what I'm going to add, but I think that I understand that there's no precedent for this, but I think everybody's in agreement that it is at least a potential. And it seems not ideal to even open us up to potential problems knowingly when they don't already exist. So I would move to strike the judicial committee may only establish all, that sentence, and replace with what I put in chat. And I would definitely be open if anybody has an idea on how to improve that language.
Okay, let me.
But that idea.
Oh, wait a minute.
So this is what you are wishing to add. I'm just going to put it in a different highlight because things get a little bit confusing. So you are looking to strike the highlighted language and insert the language in green. So you are moving to strike the judicial committee may only establish the rules of appellate procedure, amend them when no appeal or request to the judicial committee is pending, and insert, if an appeal or request is made to the judicial committee, that appeal or request shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time the appeal or request is made.
I think we've been talking about this particular issue for a while. Everybody knows what this is going to do. I would, if the committee would be all right with it, just ask Mr. Brown to weigh in. Does this
Okay, I'm
accomplish what we're
going
intending
to stop this a little bit. We've gotten a little bit loosey-goosey with this. Please, Mr. Brown's not a member of the committee, so we need to address questions to the committee or to the chair. And
Okay.
it's the prerogative of the chair to ask the parliamentarian to weigh in if appropriate.
Madam Chair, do you
Yes.
believe that this green highlighted language would allow the judicial committee to propose new rules despite an appeal pending, yet also prevent the judicial committee from putting their thumb on the scale by proposing new rules. That, yeah. Hopefully that comes across. I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining it all that well.
Yeah, I'm looking because I want to make sure there's nothing I'm missing. The existing rules shall establish. Yes, I believe it would.
See, where does it go? Okay.
Mr. Latham,
Oh, this is it.
Yeah, I guess I have a request of the sponsor, which is what is meant by request. I'm term
So,
searching that in the bylaws, and I'm not,
I
different from an
guess-
appeal.
wait, stop. We're not going to have crosstalk. So
Nope, that's it. I think he knows what I mean.
but I do want to make a notation that that term request actually goes back to Mr. Seebeck. So I do think both of them should have an opportunity to answer that request for information, because I do believe Mr. Braco is simply using the language that Mr. Seebeck used, which was when no appeal or request is made. So I first would like to hear what Mr. Seebeck intended by that, and then we could see if Mr. Braco differs. Mr. Seebeck?
Yes, could you bring up the current judicial committee rules? I think that might shed some light on the subject.
Okay, give me one moment, please. During Zoom, my connection sometimes isn't the fastest. Is it showing that screen right now where it's lp.org, or is it still showing?
You're doing fine.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
getting there.
I never know if Zoom,
Okay, you're in the bylaws and convention
Okay.
rules and so on, so.
all right, so. It's convention rules, one moment. Okay,
Not gonna blow that up? Keep going. Okay, right there in 1.1 is why I use the term request. And we also in the bylaws mention appeals to the judicial committee, and this covered, the rules here cover written request. So I included both pieces in there to cover both bases.
okay, Mr. Braco, would your answer to Mr. Latham's point of inquiry be different from Mr. Seebeck's?
Only insofar as I'm using appeal or request because the language that was being struck used appeal or request, and I saw no need to be different.
Thank you. That's what I suspected. So Mr. Seebeck had his hand raised for debate. I'm going to recognize him first and then go back to Mr. Latham. Mr. Seebeck.
Yes, I believe that the proposed change here actually accomplishes the same thing, but is better worded.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Latham.
Yeah, and I'm looking at appeal requests. I agree that the word request is used throughout, particularly our newly fangled judicial committee rules of appellate procedure. But I think those terms as they are here are interchangeable. So it just seems to me in the interest of economy that we could just do appeal. I think request might be more narrow. So I think appeal would be the broader and more inclusive term to use. So that's just my suggestion. And I mean, I support this green language. I just think we could tighten it up and just make it appeal.
Okay, this is then what would need to be done. We are already on the second level of amendment. So what I would suggest, if the committee is amenable to just making it appeal, is to pass the Bracco amendment to make the green language part of the proposal, and then an additional amendment be made to strike or request each time it appears in there. Because that would be out of order at this time, but it would be in order shortly. No matter which of these ends up staying in there, it would be in order because they both contain that or request language. So is there any further debate on the Bracco amendment? Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this and thinking that that first clause in that sentence is sort of redundant, and that it could simply say, an appeal shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time the appeal is made.
That amendment would be in order if we pass the Bracco amendment. It can be amended further.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask, because everyone seems generally, I'm just getting a sense of the room, but I could be wrong. Is there any objection to passing the Bracco amendment, realizing it can be amended further? Okay, hearing none, that passes. So this is coming out, and then let me do the formatting on this. Okay, so there were two persons who had mentioned that they would like to amend this further. There was Mr. Latham and there was Mr. Martin, but Mr. Latham was first, so Mr. Latham.
I'll just move the Latham and Martin amendments.
They were different.
Can I
Mr.
just do them all as one? Make them my new amendment, strike that first clause, replace that with N, and then strike or request where it remains. So it would read, an appeal shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time
Okay, so
the appeal is made.
an appeal, the easiest way to, shall be considered under the rules of appellate
This is Latham.
procedure in effect at the time the appeal is made. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm doing it the same way rather than doing all that weird strike through on things. I am treating it as like a sentence substitute, which is the easiest way to do it since words are divided and technically you can't really do an amendment that way. So the further amendment is to substitute in the green language for the language we had just passed. So instead of if an appeal or request is made to the judicial committee, that appeal or request shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time the appeal or request is made, that would be struck and substituted in, an appeal shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time the appeal was made. Did you wish to speak to that, Mr. Latham?
Nope. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Mr. Bracco?
I would ask Mr. Seebeck to weigh in on the removal of or request. Are there implications here? Does this really change anything other than striking extra words?
I would argue, if I may, that not all requests are appeals, but only some appeals are, but all appeals are requests. I think that one is a subset of the other. The question I think that there's consideration on that is, does a request for clarification by the judicial committee on, say, a platform plank at convention, does that fall under the terms of an appeal or just a request?
Okay, I'm going to answer that just as a point of parliamentary inquiry. The judicial committee has no jurisdiction for declaratory judgments or advisory opinions. They only have jurisdiction for appeals. Mr. Martin.
Oh, you have at, in the sentence twice,
Okay, yeah, I see that.
small typo.
Thank you. Is there any further debate on the Latham Amendment, Mr. Bracco?
So kind of a follow-up, just maybe more general to the rest of the committee. Does anyone believe that by striking request, we are in any way limiting the scope? Like, could the JC be asked to do something that would not fall under what we would call appeal? And it kind of sounded like no, but I just want to make sure.
I'm going to treat that as a parliamentary inquiry. The JC is strictly an appellate body, which is why it's called the Rules of Appellate Procedure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Brown.
I was just going to say, as a parliamentary matter, looking at the actual bylaws language, I agree that the Judicial Committee is an appellate body. I'm not sure that they have the authority just to consider requests from the LNC or anyone else. Even though they put it in their rules, but I'm not sure the bylaws permit it.
And I would agree with Mr. Brown. All parliamentary requests go to the LNC chair. At convention, they do not go to the Judicial Committee. Dr. Moulton.
I'll just say that I completely agree with that interpretation. However, the JC currently has a JC member from one of the states that I was in who has a different interpretation. So that may be where that language came from.
What I would suggest, and we could perhaps, amend it further in the future, is that JC member make a request of an LNC member to do a point of parliamentary inquiry to the LNC chair for her interpretation of the bylaws. I can tell you, as bylaws committee chair and as unofficial lay party historian, the JC has never been permitted to give advisory opinions. That's like a declaratory judgment.
I completely agree.
Yep.
In Pennsylvania, we had that problem in the past, though.
Oh yeah, you've got a big problem in Pennsylvania, but that's not the way it is on the national JC. I think the bylaws are very, very clear. We have a very limited scope JC. Ms. Arrowood.
I just want to be sure the Latham amendment is an insert and it's not striking anything.
It's going to strike all that in yellow.
Yellow, okay.
And insert what's in green.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I am stuff on my face a little bit because I did walk in the door. All right, I do not see any further debate. I'm going to ask, first explain again what it is so there isn't a confusion. What the Latham Amendment is to strike everything that is in yellow and insert everything that's in green in its place. Is there any objection to that amendment? Hearing none, that passes. Let me get that on the screen. Okay, is there any further amendment to the substitute?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're talking to yourself, Miss Arrowood, and we are all listening.
Oh, Jesus.
We're enjoying your personal conversation. Okay, now both are open for amendment. So if anyone has any amendments that came to them during the, the perfecting of the substitute that you wish to make to the primary, now is the time to do it. And I do believe there was going to be a request for reconsideration on both of them on that appended to these bylaws and convention rules, something that Dr. Moulton brought up last time. That would be an opportunity to do that now as well, reminding everyone that was something that was discussed. Mr. Latham.
Just wanted to copy the addition to the substitute, put that in the primary as well. Although I don't know where it would be best inserted. So I was just kind of contemplating that as you were talking there. Probably, yeah, the second to last sentence. So the penultimate sentence.
So you are moving to take this sentence, and I believe you would want to insert it here.
Correct.
So it's this highlight right here. So you are moving to amend the primary by inserting the language that was just passed into the substitute.
Yes,
And do you need to speak to that, Mr. Latham?
I don't.
Okay, is there any debate on this amendment? Mr. Martin?
Yeah, we're substituting that for the previous sentence. Is that correct?
No, this is an addition in the primary because the primary is worded a little bit different. So it is simply adding that sentence to the primary.
Got it.
All right, is there any objection to this amendment to the primary? He's seeing none. That is passed. Are there any further amendments to the primary or to the substitute? Dr. Moulton?
Yes. So at the last meeting, at the end of the meeting, I discussed the fact that I don't think maintained by the secretary and is appropriate at this particular place in the bylaws, because I think it is more appropriate another place in the bylaws. And actually, I kind of want to pull up the bylaws. I don't
I think
have
it
them
was
pulled up.
11.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, but I don't have them in front of me
You don't have them
right now.
memorized. How dare you?
Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Now I have them up, and no, and it wasn't Article 11. It was
Perhaps 18.
Yeah, I believe it's 18. Promulgation of bylaws.
Yes, 18.
Yeah, so I think that would be a more appropriate place to mention that the secretary maintains all this, which I agree the secretary should maintain all of this. But I don't think it's appropriate in this particular bylaw. And therefore, I move that we remove the language. Let me see, by the secretary and from both the primary and the substitute.
Would it be by the secretary or would it be shall be maintained by the secretary?
Well, there's still. Oh, you're right. Yeah, because we deleted the party headquarters part.
Right.
Yes, yes, you're right. So shall be maintained by the party secretary. So
So-
it would just say shall be appended to the party's bylaws.
So it would be
After it's
removing
deleted.
that and that from both.
No, I don't think we're removing, sorry to interrupt, but I think the shall be is gonna stay, right? Shall be appended.
Oh, okay, wait, hold on.
Yeah. Shall be appended. Should still be there.
Okay.
That's right.
Shall,
So
well,
so yeah.
here it wouldn't be because it would be a copy of the current rules of appellate procedure.
There's still the appended language in both of them.
Eh.
So we wanted to read shall be appended to the party's bylaws at the end of all
And then
this.
then the and would come out.
Right.
So this would get,
No, I think you would leave the B. I think it'd be shall be is still in there, and
Mhm.
you delete maintained by the secretary, and then you also delete the and.
okay, let me just highlight what you're looking to delete from this one, and it's slightly different, I think, in the other one, maybe not. So here, the shall be, no, it would be the same, correct? Maintained.
I
that
think
would-
it's the same. Yeah.
But there's no and in that one. That's the difference.
Yeah. So that's a mistake in the
Yeah.
substitute anyway. But if for some reason we do not pass my amendment, then we should add an end to the substitute.
Okay.
And I think I've already spoken to this both at the last meeting and briefly here, so I think people know what I'm getting at.
Right, is there any further debate on this? We did briefly talk about it last meeting. Is there any objection to this change in both the primary and the substitute? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna make those. This and was added anyway, so we can just delete that. And then this would be bold format, paragraph, text. God, I hate Google for this. I say that every single time and I will say it forever, I think. So that will come out. And same thing here, because that was in the original. Text, strike through. Okay. Are there any further, Mr. Latham?
Sure. So I'm looking at the substitute and wanting perhaps to strike that and shall be available to any member language. But then I noticed that there's another slight difference of between the two versions, bylaws and in the primary, and then bylaws and convention rules. So I guess my question to you is there a meaningful difference in just having them appended to the bylaws as opposed to having them appended to the bylaws and convention rules?
I'll treat that as a point of parliamentary inquiry. I think in the substitute, that is incorrect language. You don't append anything to the convention rules. The convention rules themselves are an appendix. You don't make an appendix to the appendix. The primary document is the bylaws. Both the convention rules and the appellate rules are appended to the bylaws.
So then so my motion would be to amend then the substitute motion that the period would be after bylaws, and then just strike everything else after that.
You want to strike and shall be available to, so it would be all of this you wish to strike.
Yes.
Going to highlight here for a second because, okay. So all of that highlighted language, Mr. Latham is moving to strike. Do you need to speak to that, Mr. Latham?
I hope not. I hope it's straightforward.
Okay, is there any further debate on that amendment? Is there any objection to that amendment? Hearing none, that passes. So since this was an addition to begin with, we can just get rid of this. This was in the original, so I will note that. Okay. Is there any further amendment to the primary or the substitute? Okay, we're getting somewhere. Now, where we are procedurally at is whether or not the substitute shall become the primary or whether the primary will remain the substitute. I do see your hand, Mr. Seebeck. I'll call upon you in one moment. What is appropriate at this point is to argue the merits of one over the other. Mr. Seebeck.
I just have a point of inquiry. At this point, what is the difference between the two proposals?
Well, I'll read them both out loud the way they would read if they're passed. And I think hearing them verbally will make that potentially clear. Here's the primary. The Judicial Committee may establish new or propose amendments to existing rules of appellate procedure to govern its consideration of matters within the scope of its jurisdiction. The Judicial Committee shall submit new proposals to the National Committee for approval, which approval shall be deemed given unless denied by a 2/3 vote of the National Committee within 60 days of submission. If denied or while proposals are pending, the existing rules remain in effect. An appeal shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time the appeal is made. A copy of the current rules of appellate procedure shall be appended to the party bylaws. That is the primary. The substitute. The Judicial Committee may establish new rules of appellate procedure or amend the current rules of appellate procedure to govern its consideration of matters within the scope of its jurisdiction. The existing rule shall remain in effect until and unless the Judicial Committee establishes new rules or amends the current rules. An appeal shall be considered under the rules of appellate procedure in effect at the time the appeal is made. A copy of the current rules of appellate procedure shall be appended to these bylaws. If the committee will permit me slight commentary, what I see as the main difference is a slight difference in the wording of the first sentence, which I don't think really makes it stylistic. The main difference is in one, the LNC has to approve or deny changes. And in the second, in the substitute, the Judicial Committee can on its own initiative establish new rules. That to me is the big difference between the two. There are some stylistic differences that aren't substantive as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Latham.
No, I agree, Madam Chair. I think that is the big difference between the two. And so although I find myself supportive of both, I just think the primary is going to be more palatable to our membership with that check and balance in place there. That's it.
Thank you. I'm going to also debate on behalf of the primary. I do not believe the Judicial Committee should be able to establish its own rules with no checks or balances. While the LNC approving it might not be ideal, I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I will be, if the vote comes down to me, my practice is not to vote unless my vote makes a difference. If it comes down to that, I will be supporting the primary. As chair, I would though remind the committee that there is if this is a very even vote, with one barely winning over the other, perhaps the non-winning side wants to consider a minority report. I don't really like minority reports. I like the committee to be united. However, that is a right that you have that I like to continually remind the committee of their rights. So is there any further debate between the substitute motion and the primary motion? You seeing now we're going to move to, Mr. Seebeck.
Sorry, I was a little slow on the button
That's
there.
okay.
If the primary motion goes into play instead of the substitute, that effectively means that the only differences between the original current language and the primary motion is how what rules apply to an appeal and who takes care of the copy of the rules. For all
No,
the words,
there's one other difference, Mr. Seebeck, if you don't mind me interrupting. The amendments can happen at any time rather than just within 90 days in both of the motions.
fair enough. Okay, so then I withdraw my comment because that's what I was about ready to say is not applicable.
Yeah, I thought I'm sorry to interrupt you. I hope you did not take that.
No.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've been dealing with this. Okay, all right, so I don't see any other hands. So the motion before the committee is, shall the substitute motion become the primary motion? A yes vote will get rid of the primary, it'll be gone. And then we will move on whether or not to adopt the substitute. A no vote will get rid of the substitute, and then we'll be voting on whether or not to adopt the primary.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Okay. Yes. So the motion before us is, shall the substitute motion become the primary motion? A yes vote makes the primary motion go away and the substitute becomes the primary. A no vote makes the substitute motion go away and the primary remains the primary. Is that
Got it.
clearer?
It is. I apologize. It got garbled on my audio.
Well, I probably garbled it in my stating as well. So that is the motion before us. Ms. Arrowood, if you could take a roll call vote.
Unmute Miss Arrowood.
Thank you. Arrowood, I'm voting no. Bracco,
No.
Sizelski,
No.
Latham,
No.
Martin,
No.
Seebeck.
Yes.
All right. Moulton,
No.
Logan,
No.
Rogers.
No.
Madam Chair, do you care to vote?
No, thank you.
All right. We have 8 noes, 1 yes, 1 abstain.
Okay, so the substitute motion goes away, but I don't want to lose this language only because Ms. Arrowood may need it for notes later. So where we are at
Yes.
is the primary motion, which is the language on the screen. The only amendments which are in order to this at this time is additions, which is adding to the beginning or the end. The rest of the language, unless we go through reconsideration, is what it is. So unless there are some additions, we are going to move on whether or not to adopt the primary motion as the recommendation of the committee. First, I'm going to ask, is there any objection to adopting the primary motion? Mr. Seebeck?
I have a point of inquiry regarding the language.
Yes, Mr. Seebeck?
The way this is worded right now, if the judicial committee can submit new proposed rules to the LNC for approval, and there's a 60-day window upon which they would be considered to be, after which they would consider to be deemed approved unless there's a 2/3 vote to say no. What is to stop the judicial committee for then avalanching the national committee with multiple proposals over that period? And how is it going to be determined which one is the right set of rules? This is the same argument in either direction. Of, you want to avalanche the judicial committee with rules. Well, now we're avalanching the LNC with rules.
It would be in order of priority,
But then which ones are in effect when? See,
the latest one. So let's
this
say,
is the problem of having the LNC oversight.
that debate is over. We've already gotten, unless you're arguing against passing the primary
I am arguing
entirely.
against
Oh,
passing. the
oh,
primary
okay, thank
entirely.
you.
Because this puts us back in the position of only taking out the 90 days, changing who takes care of the copy of the rules, and establishes one sentence that the rules stay into effect while an appeal is pending. Of all those three, they're decent proposals, but the oversight issue is still the problem because there's still an inherent conflict of interest here that has never been addressed by this committee. And that is the fundamental problem with both the original language and the primary proposal, which is why the substitute was made in the first place. I'm not going to vote for this because that interest, that conflict of interest and that violation of separation of powers of this committee versus the other committee, being the LNC and the Judicial Committee, is not maintained. It is breached. And we should know better than that.
Mr. Bracco?
So I just like to say, for the benefit of Mr. Seebeck, that I would be more amenable to like a further proposal if you wanted to come up with something new. My biggest objection to the substitute was that it's doing two things. Like the original proposal by Mr. Latham, the intention was to solve the 90-day problem. And I just felt like it made it a lot more difficult to pass if you're solving the 90-day problem and doing something else rather than just solving the 90-day problem. So I would request that. I think that the vote has shown that my opinion at least, the committee doesn't have the stomach for the Judicial Committee being able to create rules without any sort of check. If there's a different check, some other kind of mechanism, I don't know what a good one would be, but maybe there's something I can't think of. And if you wanted to come back with another proposal, I'd definitely be more open to it.
Okay, I believe I was next in line. Mr. Bracco, that would be the purpose of a minority report, which can be done. That would, keep some of these 90-day changes and the other things, but have a different oversight. And I would encourage members who might feel that way to work with each other and come up with a minority report, as has been our custom. I know there's been disagreement on this in the past, but this is the way it's been. I do not believe that you have to vote against the primary motion to also sign on to a minority report, because you might believe the primary motion is better than our current language, but even better is the minority language. So you do not have to vote no in order to sign on to a minority report. Of course, you are free to vote no as well. But I would encourage members who would like to see a different oversight to get together and come to an agreement amongst yourselves for a different oversight. The substitute motion has already been defeated. So we are on whether we're going to pass this or not. I urge everyone to pass this one. It has worked out for, I'm not going to say 50 years because I haven't looked at every set of bylaws back to the 1970s, but to my knowledge, when it's always been this way, and there has to be oversight, and this is the most simplest. You can't. To me, what's worse than LNC oversight is no oversight, of having the committee do what it wants with no oversight. So I do urge passage of this proposal. Mr. Seebeck.
At the end of the last meeting, I proposed an alternative solution. It fell on deaf ears, and that was leave the oversight to the convention. So there is an alternative that could be done. It was ignored. If the committee does not have the stomach to put that out, then they shouldn't have the stomach to propose this either. The reality of it is that what we're dealing with here, again, is a separation of powers violation. It doesn't make any sense. I don't care how passive you make it for the LNC approval or not. That still gives them a voice in proceedings rules which affect them directly. And that's wrong. No court has a congressional oversight or a legislative oversight for their rules of procedure. It just doesn't happen. And there's no reason for it here. And we can argue to tradition and history all we want, but as they say in the stock market, past performance is no indication of future results. And if somebody wishes to find a loophole to exploit to make the life difficult for all of this, it is very easy to do so if you have this conflict going on.
Thank you, Mr.
The Judicial
Seebeck.
Committee is elected by the convention. It is subject to the oversight of the convention, not the LNC. That is the key point of all of this.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Latham.
And just maybe to remind the committee, the initial inspiration for this proposal was to, again, address kind of that 90-day problem, 4-year judicial committee terms, the need to maybe amend rules more frequently than just once every 4 years. And then, of course, giving that authority then creates other scenarios, which I think our discussion was helpful in adding some of that new language toward the end there. But I did want to address one point. It's not correct to say that, for example, legislative bodies have no ability to affect the rules of judicial bodies. You see that at the federal level. There's discussions, for example, in Congress wanting to make Article 3 changes that restrict the jurisdiction of the federal courts. We see it in my state of Utah. I suspect we see it in most other states. So there is that check and balance that goes on in state-based, 3-branch governing structures, aside from just private or semi-private organizations like ours. So I don't think it's accurate to say that judicial bodies get to make their own rules with no oversight other than being elected by a body. Of course, at the federal level, you don't elect judges, but in many states you do. But you still have legislative bodies that perform one kind of check, and then of course the executive can also perform other kinds of checks.
Thank you, Mr. Latham. I was going to say the same thing that you were, that just wasn't an accurate statement in law. Whether that applies to us as a voluntary society is a little bit different, but that was factually inaccurate. Mr. Seebeck.
With all respect to both of you, you're not stating what I said. What I said specifically was about rules of procedure, not jurisdiction. Yes, there is the ability to limit jurisdiction legislatively, but there is not authority legislatively to limit rules of procedure. There has never been a legislation in Congress or in the state legislatures proposed to limit or change rules of procedure for a court. It doesn't exist.
We need
I would prefer that people do not try to dictate what I said, what is not what I said.
Can we please just tone like nobody here is enemies. Mr. Latham.
Okay, but that claim is also not correct. And I am seeing this in Utah right now, and it's a battle, right? It's a battle between two branches of government. And you have one branch, the judicial branch, that wants to amend various rules of procedure. There are several kinds. We have criminal, civil, rules of evidence. And then sometimes you have the legislature saying, you know what, judicial branch, we do not like your procedural rules that you're changing. So we are actually going to exercise our constitutional authority and change them by statute. And so it absolutely happens. So again, it's just not correct to say that there's not check and balance when check and balances as to rules of procedure.
And I meant to have my hand up, but I did not. I put on the screen, this is passed by the Colorado legislature, the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure. There's also the Colorado Rules of Appellate Procedure. So it's just factually not correct. Now, courts do get to adopt some of their own rules. Federal courts called like local rules. Colorado's a little bit different than Florida.
Legislature passed authorizing legislation, not actual legislation. There's a big difference. I've been
Mr.
studying legislative process for decades. There's a difference.
Mr. Seebeck, please raise your hand if you would like to get in line for debate. Mr. Rogers.
Yes, it seems we're concerned about the ability of the LNC to somehow overrule a decision by the Judicial Committee. And that's not what's on the table here. I mean, rules of procedure, I suppose there could be a decision that a rule of procedure could inure to the benefit of some faction on the LNC, and they might want to control that. But of course, the Judicial Committee would be aware of that before they send a question up. I just don't think rules of procedure are going to have that much of an effect on the actual outcome of a particular case, which is what the concern seems to be. So I think we're mixing apples and oranges in our.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Is there any further debate? Hearing none, Ms. Arrowood, if you would proceed to a roll call vote. The question before the body is, shall we adopt the primary motion as it exists on the screen as the recommendation of the committee, with just one caveat? Any two members of a bylaws committee can sign off on a minority report. It does not require a vote of this committee. It's up to any two of you guys, and you do not need permission from anyone else to do it as long as you can get someone to join in with you. And I do encourage that on contentious issues. Ms. Arrowood.
You're muted.
Okay, I'm going to vote yes. Bracco,
Yes.
Sazelsky,
Yes.
Latham,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Seebeck.
No.
All right. Moulton,
Yes.
Logan,
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote as it stands right now is 8 yes, 1 no. Do you wish to vote?
No, I do not.
All
So-
right, then it's 8-1-0.
So that passes. We are moving on to the next proposal. This is a proposal from myself, and I will put it up on the screen. This was to standardize committees. It's been a while since I looked at this, so please, these are changes to rules 4 and 5, so not bylaws, it's rules. And it is to delete Rule 4, just a reminder to everyone, we don't have to worry about renumbering things. Obviously, deleting Rule 4 will make Rule 5 the new Rule 4. That's not something committees need to worry about. That's considered a conforming change that the secretary at the time things are passed can just move. So please don't worry about saying we need to renumber things. That's kind of an automatic thing. So I'm moving to delete Rule 4 and make the following changes to Rule 5. For Rule 5, it used to just be for the platform committee. So Rule 4, well, first, I'm kind of like not explaining this well, but I will in a moment. So deleting Rule 4, and what Rule 4 was debating and voting for the Bylaws and Rules Committee. We had an entirely separate rule for debating and voting for the platform committee. This would combine both committees into one rule to have consistent rules for debating bylaws and rules changes and also platform changes, because there was some weird incongruity between the two sets of rules. For instance, if you look up at, like, one of the weird ones was the chair of the Bylaws and Rules Committee shall report each recommendation. Yet if you look down at Rule 5 for platform, it said the platform committee chair or some other person designated by him or her. So why was there allowed to be a designee on the platform committee, but not on the bylaws committee? Just with these weird incongruities. Also, platform committee had automatic right to minority reports, where the bylaws committee did not have an automatic right to it. You can do it, but it wouldn't necessarily be heard in the same way a platform committee could. So this standardizes the two committees to have the same rules, so that you don't have to go, oh, is this a rule for bylaws or is this a rule to platform? So it simplifies our convention rules. I'm gonna make this a little, you might not be able to read it if I make it too small, but on the agenda, there is a link so that you can pull this up on your own screen. So that's what I am moving. Mr. Seebeck.
Yes, could you scroll up just a hair, please?
To here,
Yes, to see it, yes.
let me make it a little larger. There we go.
Because you were jumping all over the place, I couldn't read anything.
Sure.
All right, here's my question. This would, on Rule 4, there's a provision that says that the recommendation of discussion for the bylaws proposals without amendment from the floor. Does that carry through to Rule 5, or will these proposals be automatically open to amendment?
It carries through. Let me find where.
I think it's 3B.
Yes.
All right, now can we go back up again to the first part? Okay. It was 8 minutes per bylaws proposal before. This would increase that to 15 below.
Yes, it
Is
was.
that something we want, to have a 15-minute debate without amendment?
I can just tell you as maker of the motion, I don't care what number it is. I just want it to be the same for both.
So I want to make sure that we understand, everybody understands what the role and what it would change. But there are some changes here.
Okay, Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, I just want to say I strongly support this proposal, and I've made similar proposals to the bylaws committee several times in the past. Unfortunately, sometimes they haven't been reported out, and and sometimes our whole report hasn't been heard. But I strongly support this, and it's been a long time coming.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. And again, just to repeat, to emphasize what Mr. Seebeck said, 15 minutes is a long time. I don't care if we make that shorter. Like, I just want consistency. That's my goal here. And I think Dr. Moulton probably agrees with me on that, though I don't want to put words in his mouth. Mr. Bracco.
Would it be in order to make amendments at this time?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Then I would like to amend Rule 5, Section 3B. In the first sentence, it says 15. If you could strike 15 and replace it with 8. That's it.
Just give me one moment. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Bracco?
Briefly. So this is actually maintaining what is currently the procedure for the bylaws, and it is shortening it for the platform. But as people had mentioned, 15 minutes is a long time. I'm basically copying from the platform where you have 2 minutes for the committee chair or their designee to talk, speak in favor of the motion. And then 8 minutes of debate, and then you vote. And then you can have amendments. And I believe the 10 minutes of amendments is the same. Just verify that.
I believe it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
amend
Yeah.
for a period up to 10 minutes.
Yeah. So we have, with this, we're maintaining the consistency of the bylaws rule, the existing Rule 4 of 2 minutes to talk, 8 minutes of debate. So you have a total of 10, and then after, if that were to fail, you have a total of 10 for amendments. So I think this is going to, it doesn't affect anything for bylaws versus current, but for platform, I think it's going to hopefully speed things along.
Okay. Again, as I said, as long as they're consistent, that's my main objective. However, I'm going to slightly speak against the 8. I always thought 15 was far too long in general, but I want to remind everyone that under Roberts, and somebody please, because I've looked at so many bylaws these past couple months, they're all jumbled together. I don't think we have a rule that limits how long someone can talk. Unlike Colorado, where we limit debate to 2 minutes, under Roberts, someone can get on the mic and talk for 10 minutes. Giving only 8 minutes, if you've got Rand Paul out there, who's a great filibusterer, they could take up that entire 8 minutes. I prefer 10 minutes for both, to be honest with you. I think that also makes it easier to remember when it's the same number. 10 minutes without amendment, 10 minutes with amendment. And if we don't have a rule somewhere that limits the amount of time people can talk and debate and the number of times, though Roberts will limit it to 2 to a question, we might want to consider that. Not here, but we might want to consider that. But I prefer 10 to keep things consistent, but it's up to you guys. Dr. Moulton and then Mr. Seebeck.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to propose an amendment to 10. Can I make that as a substitute, or are we too many levels down here?
Nope. My proposal was a main motion to amend something previously adopted. We're 1 level of amendment in. You can move to strike 8 and put in 10.
I moved to strike 8 and put in 10. I'm sorry. May I speak to my motion?
Oh, go right ahead while I'm doing this.
Yeah. So I agree with everything the chair said, but the main point that I would make is just 10 is a simple number. it splits the difference. And it's just a round number. 8 is a weird number. And if we go to one extreme or the other, to the 8 or the 15, then people are going to be slighted in one direction or the other. I think 10 is just simple, so it's going to be easier for people to wrap their heads around.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton, Mr. Seebeck, and then Mr. Bracco.
I actually wanted to speak on the main motion, but to answer your question, Roberts only limits on number of times to speak, but not on duration.
No, that's not correct. Mr.
Yeah,
Brown?
it's-
I
He
don't
said
know.
he stepped out.
He came back, though. I can look that up in the meantime, but I believe it's 2 times to any question, 10 minutes each.
That is correct. You can speak twice for 10 minutes each time.
Thank you, Ms. Arrowood. Mr. Seebeck, did you have, oh, you wanted to get back in line for when we get to the top level?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Don't let me forget that, please. Mr. Bracco?
Yes, so I would just like to point out that this 8 is being layered on top of the 2 minutes for the chair or designee to speak. So you do get a total of 10. I believe that is the setup. I was assuming that was intentional in the current rule 4, is that it's 2 minutes for the chair and not the designee for some reason, and 8 minutes of discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it, and then you vote, and then 10 minutes. So it is like 10 and 10, whereas with this, it would be 12 and 10. That's okay. I think that the point that was brought up about, well, that 10 could be monopolized by one person, that's a bigger problem, but also not for here. So I'm okay with either one, but I do want to just point that out, that in total, it is 10 and 10.
Okay, thank you. I suppose that's up for interpretation. I will argue against that interpretation. The committee chair isn't debating, they're explaining. So I don't think it's 10 and 10. The 2 minutes is to explain the recommendation. It has an element of advocacy to it, but it's not strictly debate. It's explanation to set up people to debate. So I don't think 8 is 10 and 10. I think that 2 minutes is completely separate from what the floor does. I don't think you should confuse what the chair does with what the floor does. 2 entirely different creatures. Okay, is there any further debate on Dr. Moulton's amendment to the amendment? Okay, I am going to ask, is there any objection to Dr. Moulton's amendment to the amendment? Okay, hearing none, the 8 goes away and we are looking at 10. Is there any debate now with Dr. Moulton's amendment becoming the primary amendment between 10 minutes and 15 minutes? Seeing none, is there any objection to striking 15 and inserting 10? Okay, hearing none, that passes, and I believe Mr. Seebeck had wanted to be recognized at this point.
Yes, I totally agree with this proposal. Getting consistency across the board will simplify things for the delegates. It will simplify things for the process. And it will also make it much more consistent for the average viewer on C-SPAN to see what's going on if this shows up during those broadcasts or on the webcasts online. So yeah, I would encourage this as is now.
And I can tell you, Mike Seebeck and I literally did daily devotionals on this kind of crap, and we always forgot what the number is. Having a consistent number, if it helps people who live and breathe these things, it will definitely help normal people who don't live and breathe these things. Mr. Latham.
Did you just call me not normal?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
That their designee language, I was just following the earlier discussion, and I was searching through my memory banks, maybe Chuck or others, even Madam Chair could. I want to say the reason there was a disparity between one and the other was to open up the possibility of bringing in, if you're doing a platform debate, someone with star power, or, had a relevant story to tell as to, why a policy should be adopted. I think that becomes less applicable in the bylaws context, but I could be wrong. But I just want to throw that out because that was coming to my mind. I could be completely mistaken in imagining that, but that's why I thought that was there.
Dr. Moulton?
Yeah, to answer Mr. Latham, that was originally why it was there, but what we found in practice was, number one, it was rare for the platform committee to bring in subject matter experts who are policy wonks. And number two, on the bylaws committee, very often we would have someone who was the champion of a particular bylaw. They may have written the bylaws proposal. And sometimes it made more sense for them to speak about it than the chair. The chair could at times be opposed to a proposal. So yeah, I think the designee makes sense. You could also have a case where the committee chair doesn't make it to the convention for some reason or another. And I suppose you could elect a new chair, but it's easier to just be able to have a designee. So I think it's useful for both committees. And by the way, the or their designee, that this is language that we proposed at the last convention, and there just was not time to hear the bylaws committee report, if my recollection is right, although I was out with COVID for most of the convention, so I can't necessarily speak to what happened on the floor.
To supplement what Dr. Moulton said as well, the way what the original intention may have been hasn't really been the way it's worked out. Generally the way it's worked out is the chair of the platform, which is what I have experience with. I've been platform committee chair 3 times, feels that somebody's more passionate about an issue and can argue it better. And a good chair will realize that it's in the best interest of the committee to have a different person argue, or more often it's because the chair fundamentally disagrees with the proposal and feels that that disagreement will come through in their presentation and prejudice the convention floor against the proposal. So they step aside to allow someone else who fervently supports it. So that's why the designee language is in there. That's the way it's worked out. And I've done that. There was some, I don't remember what it was that I really disagreed with, but I had Andy Craig do the committee proposal in 2018 on something I fundamentally disagreed with and agreed with the minority report. I think it's the only time I've ever done that, but it did happen then. And I think on the sex workers point, there was somebody on the committee. I didn't disagree with the proposal, but I think was it Starchild? I think we let speak on it because he actually was a sex worker. So he was more passionate, obviously, about it than I ever could be, even though I supported it. Mr. Latham.
So now I got to ask, did the one in which Andy Craig presented the proposal pass or not pass?
It did not pass. I don't remember if the minority report passed. and I'm obviously, since I disagreed with that, I don't think it was a good proposal. And I think that's why it didn't pass. Andy Craig did a very good job of presenting it.
Okay, I'm just, a cynic might say that you could sink a proposal by who you designate to present the proposal.
Yeah, no, Andy Craig was the champion of it. He's the one who moved it. So, you know, I know people will say, well, that gives a lot of power to the committee chair. If you think your committee chair is going to do that, you should have never have elected them as committee chair. I mean, there comes to be a point where you are entrusting the committee chair with certain things. And I think this needs to be one of them, or you shouldn't have elected that person. Dr. Moulton.
Conversely, from the perspective of the Bylaws Committee, when I chaired the Bylaws Committee, I spoke for a proposal that I was strongly against, and that proposal passed. So I was too good at advocacy, apparently, and that's why we have approval voted. So sorry to everyone for that.
Yeah. Now we're going to pillory you. Bring back tar and feathering. Okay, so we are back to the amendment phase. Are there further amendments to this proposal? I don't know if you still had your hand raised, Dr. Moulton. There is something that I wanted to point out here that is a substantive change that might not be completely obvious to everyone, though Dr. Moulton, I'm sure, will see what I did here. Proposal 4A. It used to say spokesperson for both the majority and minority positions shall each have 2 minutes to present their views. There's always been a question, can you have more than one minority report? It doesn't say you can't. I think flipping the each there makes it clearer that there can be multiple minority reports, but I just wanted to bring that up, that has been an issue. This would probably be the time to amend that if we wanted to limit to one minority report. I'm not in particular favor of that, but just wanted to bring that up. Also, this deletion here, where it talks about proposals which were considered by the platform committee, but didn't get a favorable vote from the majority may be considered. I cannot find a time in history that we've ever had time to do this. Never. So to me, this gives people useless hope that this will happen. It never has. Now, in case anyone's wondering, well, couldn't these people just do a minority report? No, you can't do a minority report for which there is no majority report, which means something had to pass, which got a majority vote. I would say for persons who feel very favorably about something that didn't even get a majority report, you can try to suspend the rules from the floor and have it heard as a floor proposal. But this thing needs to go. It's never been used, in my opinion. So that's the other major change. Everything else is just standardizing. But I did want to highlight those two things, which are not standardization, that are actually more substantive change. Okay, so amendment or debate, either is in order. Okay, seeing none, I'm not going to ask if there's no objection, since this is a lot of, I'm not gonna say it's a lot of changes, but it's a main proposal. I would like to have a roll call vote on this. A yes vote will pass these changes, including the deletion of Rule 4, and then these changes to Rule 5, which will become Rule 4, as the recommendation of the committee. Ms. Arrowood, when you can, if you would take a roll call vote.
All right. Arrowwood, I'm going to vote yes. Bracco,
Yes.
Sizelsky,
Yes.
Latham,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Seebeck,
Yes.
Moulton,
Yes.
Logan,
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
We have 9 yeses and 0 nos. Do you care to vote?
No, Madam Secretary. So that passes.
9, 0, 1.
Okay, another proposal from myself. Short, I don't even remember this one, so I guess we shall see. It's amend convention rule 5.1. So it's an additional proposal to the same section we were looking at, but part of it that we didn't touch. I felt it was an entirely separate issue. This has to do with platform deletion tokens. This, let me see what I actually proposed. Hopefully I still like it. Okay. Okay, the 2 changes. It says after the adoption of the convention agenda, that isn't actually when this happens. I don't know why that sentence is in there. It actually happens right before the platform committee report. So I deleted after the adoption of the convention agenda because that's just wrong, and changed it to at each regular convention because it does happen at each regular convention. But the major change is moving from 20% or more of the credentialed delegates of to 1/3, which is 33 and 1/3%. So and I do see your hand, Mr. Seebeck. I'll just speak to my amendment and then I will call upon you. Right now, a very, very small number of people can force a vote. I know it still requires, well, right now, as the rules stand, 50% to delete, though we passed an amendment. I think we did it on national. I know we did it in Colorado. Mike will have to remind me that it will require a 2/3 vote, but still there's been a lot of resentment about this rule from people who think this threshold should be higher. And instead of amending it, a lot of people just want to delete this rule in its entirety. I would like not that to happen because I like the fact that deletion of planks are more in the control of the floor. Because I hate seeing platform committees waste time arguing deletions, which happens all the time. Maybe not so much now that the abortion plank has been deleted, which, by the way, I was not in favor of. I know everyone has various feels on that, but just saying, this might not be so big of an issue now. But it's been a sore point, and I'd like to solve this sore point by raising the percentage to 1/3 rather than 20%. That's the major change. Mr. Seebeck.
A question and then a debate point. The question is, could that first part have been a residual from a time past when there wasn't an agenda set up in the convention rules?
It could be, or it could be because we have a standard form of agenda. It could have been that the platform committee report was first. So functionally, it was right after the adoption of the agenda, but it's not that way now.
Fair enough. Now, the debate point is this. I appreciate the sentiment of doing this. I also understand why. I'm not opposed to it, but I have a concern. The concern is that in light of what happened at the last convention with the abortion plank, that it could very easily be perceived, whether it is true or not, that this is an attempt to bump up the threshold after that has been done in a form of locking the barn after the horse has been stolen. I'm not saying that's an accurate representation, but I'm saying it could be perceived that way, and that could hinder passage of this. I'm actually in favor of this. I think the whole token thing is a pain in the butt, and I speak of that as both a teller and as a delegate. But 20% is too low.
And I do see your point, Mr. Seebeck. I think it would be incumbent upon me as chair to address that, because that would be true if it were an abortion plank getting added in and then trying to raise the threshold to delete it. But right now there's nothing. So what it really does is give some security to delegates who may be able to round the votes up to get an abortion plank added back in, that it would be protected a bit more than the other one was. I did want to answer a question in chat from Eric Thrain, who said the sketchy part was we went from deletion to modification with only a sketchy parliamentary path with how we get there with the bigotry plank. I actually don't agree that it was a sketchy parliamentary path, though it may have been not entirely clear, the path, but it was basically a suspension of the rules. There were 2/3 of people who would rather have modified it rather than deletion. I think it was actually very parliamentarily sound. It just might not have been explained very well how we got there parliamentary wise. But these are convention rules, and it was suspended to allow modification rather than deletion. Mr. Sazowski.
Yeah, I was just trying to look at the numbers here, right? I mean, we're bumping the threshold. So if I'm doing this right, and I mean, it's 10:30 at night, so I might not be. I think, assuming everything at the current level of 20%, we're looking at about 40 people to force a vote. And
You
that,
mean if everyone cast all 5 of their tokens
Yes.
on one? Yeah.
yeah, right. The bare minimum number, we're looking about 40, and 1/3, it's about 67, 70-ish. So I guess a little better. I mean, I guess almost double. I just wanted to maybe throw numbers out to give a little bit of an idea there.
Thank you, Mr. Sazowski. Is there any further debate on these two? And just to let you guys, they are somewhat unrelated. I would like to move them together, but if we wanted to vote on them separately, they could be divided. But I would hope that the first change is relatively uncontroversial because it's just wrong. And that the second change is the most substantive one, but it is up to the committee. Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to this. I actually, I would be opposed to raising the deletion threshold from majority to 2/3. I'm not sure whether we've done that already or not.
We have.
But okay, yeah. Well, I'll have a minority report on that. But I do want to point out that this is something that was considered by the previous bylaws committee, and the previous bylaws committee noticed that there's 2 things that could be modified here, and you've modified one of them, which is the threshold. Another thing we could change is the number of tokens. So currently, I believe people are issued 5. We could issue less or more tokens as an alternative or additional way of changing the math. And again, I'm not opposed to this. I'm fine with voting for this. I just wanted to bring to people's attention, if they wanted to jigger the math, they could consider both of those methods. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Moulton. That's a point very well taken. I highlighted up top here just so the committee can see where it does say 5. Mr. Seebeck,
Is it in order to move to amend that right now?
yes.
Then agreeing with Mr. Moulton, I move to amend that part to change 5 to 2.
Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Seebeck?
Yeah, really simple. As a teller, we had a mountain of tokens that we had to deal with to tally and get organized. This will make our lives a lot simpler. It still gives the token voice to the delegates, and it will simplify that process a little bit. Now, I do have a question though, and the other tokens that we use for these are for the presidential and vice presidential debate. The question is, what were the number of tokens for them? Was that also 5 or was that something different?
I don't know off the top of my head
I'm
because
just
it's
thinking
different.
I'm just thinking for consistency and clarity's sake.
Let's see. That's a
That's just
relatively new.
It's a reference point, and that's all.
Yeah, let me do a word search, and we are coming up in a few minutes. That's there. God, we use the word token a lot. We like that word. Oh wait, what? Right. Let me go back. I went too fast. I don't think it says a number. 30 registered delegates. So it's not tokens. It's joining in nomination. I think the tokens you were talking about it wasn't a rule. I think this was something that was done by the convention committee for debate.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right.
it wasn't a convention rule. It was
Okay.
just something they decided to do on their own.
Okay, so that doesn't really matter then. Okay. I was thinking that it was that was something else related, but if it's really not, then that's no big deal.
And I don't remember what they did. Okay, Mr. Rogers, then Dr. Moulton.
Am I muted or not?
We can hear you.
Okay. I would like to advocate for an odd number. With all due respect to the mountain of tokens and, not having to climb a mountain, but people can sometimes might want to split their vote a little bit and they want to support more than one person. And to have only 2 tokens means I'm voting for 2 people. And I think of both of them equally.
Mr. Rogers, if you don't, this is for platform planks, not people. I just want to make sure.
Okay. Well, but platform, I don't know. I still want to advocate for an odd number because it sort of forces almost a ranked choice voting. I don't split my vote between 2 different proposals, to maybe different amendments. I have to choose which one I want to support more than the other.
Mr. Rogers, are you moving to amend 2 to be 3, or are you just speaking in debate?
Well, I don't know if there's any support for what I just said, so I'll let somebody else make that motion if they support that idea. I'm just throwing it out there at this point. I don't know
Okay.
which is, because it is for planks, as you say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. Dr. Moulton?
I was going to make that amendment. I move that we amend 2 to 3, though my reasoning is somewhat different. May I speak to my amendment?
Yes, please.
I'm indifferent to all of these numbers. Honestly, platform is not my thing. I leave that to other people.
Hush your mouth.
However, I am worried about what can pass at convention, and I think we ought to be careful not to overreach. And I think 5 to 2 may be too drastic a change. I think 5 to 3 is more likely to enjoy support on the delegate floor. So for that reason, I would prefer 3 to 2.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. Mr. Bracco?
So just I want to throw out the numbers here of what everybody's talking about so that everybody has the context. So the existing, I'm assuming 1,050 delegates for all of these. The existing is 5 tokens per delegate and 20% means 42 people could cause a vote. The original proposal is 5 tokens and 33% or 1/3, whatever, 70%. Or sorry, 70 people. Then the 2 token proposal at 33% is 175 people. And the 3 token is 117. And maybe it'd be good if I put that in the chat. So I just wanted to give everybody context.
Thank you, Mr. Bracco. I support the Moulton amendment. I don't think 5 to 2 will pass. I think 5 to 3 could and is a good compromise, and just aesthetically, I like 3 with 1/3. I don't know. I like the 3-3 for just aesthetic purposes, which I know is might not be the best argument in the world. Okay, I'm going to lower my hand. We're still okay. We are at 8:44. Is there any further debate on the secondary motion of amending 2 to 3? Mr. Seebeck?
Yeah, could Mr. Bracco put that math in the chat? I'd like to see the numbers and, oh, there we go. Hang on a second. Okay, thank you. That helps me out. Okay, I can live with 3 instead of 2. So
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. So I'm going to ask, is there any objection to striking 2 and instead making the primary amendment 3? Okay, hearing none, that passes. So now we are looking at striking 5 and inserting 3. Is there any further debate on that?
Madam Chair,
Ms.
My-
Arrowood?
doesn't work, but this is just a inquiry. I noticed sometimes it will say signature tokens, and at other times it just says tokens. Is there more than one type of token? I don't know.
No, there isn't. I have no idea why it says signature tokens there.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
I think because they have to sign them. If you look later, like at C, it says and signing the token. I think that's why.
Oh,
Mr. Logan?
With the math that was pointed out, right? Changing the original proposal that you had, changing to 1/3, that changed the number of votes up to 70 people. And now that we've changed the number of tokens to 3, that again moves it up to 117 people. But changing just the number of tokens to 3 without changing the threshold, right? If we left it at 20%, that would be 70 people, which was about the same as your proposal for changing from 20% to a third. So I guess my point is, or my motion is that I like 70 people and I think it's adequately high. And now that we've changed the number of tokens to 3, I would like to change the percentage threshold back to 20 and not a third.
Okay, we haven't passed the 3 yet. That's still
Okay.
a pending amendment.
Oh,
And
I'm sorry. I'm out of order, I guess.
yeah, no, well, no, it's fine. If we pass that, it would be in order for you to then go back and change the other to strike the 1/3 and keep it at 20%. But we are now out of time. Unless there's a motion to extend time, we are going to adjourn in exactly the procedural posture we are at right now. So is there such a motion to extend time? Just blurt it out if there is.
Move
So
to
moved.
extend 10 minutes.
Okay, there is a motion to extend for 10 minutes. Is there any objection to extending time for 10 minutes? Hearing none, time is extended for 10 minutes. So where we are at now is striking 5 and inserting 3. Is there any further debate on that amendment? All right, hearing none, that amendment passes. 5 is stricken and we are at 3. I'm going to recognize Mr. Logan because I believe he now wanted to make a motion down towards the bottom here.
Yes, I motion to change this proposal so that it's back to 20% and not have the 1/3 be part of the proposed change anymore.
Okay, so you're basically moving to strike the strike. Well, yeah, to leave it the same. Let's just keep
Yeah.
things simple. I'm just highlighting it and it would then just stay 20%. Don't worry about my colors and stuff. I'm just trying not to waste time. I think everyone understands. Pardon me. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Logan?
Yeah, ultimately, it's just a numbers game for how many people we feel comfortable being able to express this kind of minority opinion and be heard on the floor. And I'm comfortable with us raising it from 42 to 70, and I don't think it needs to be raised more. So.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Mr. Latham.
I guess I have a question. So does Paul's math he has in the chat, it's exactly the same, but I'm also hearing that with 20% and 3 tokens, it's lower than 117. So, and Paul's just posting in the chat here. So 70, yeah. I think that's too low. I thought, I know we all have our Goldilocks preferences. I do think this 175 is too high. I think 70 is too low. This 117 is my sweet spot.
So you're like Goldilocks, the portrait, or what's it, pottage or whatever. It's just right. Porridge, that's what I'm saying.
Mush.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Latham. I'm sorry, I like swallowed a pot to sticker down the wrong way, Mr. Sazowski.
All right, so if we go to 20%, what I'm seeing is that's gonna take 6.6% of 6.7% of delegates minimum to get something heard. If we go to 1/3, that's 11.1. So I'm kind of find myself agreeing with Mr. Latham here. I feel like right around that 10% is probably the right place for that.
Okay, is there any further debate on Mr. Logan's amendment to strike the 1/3 so that it would leave it intact at 20%. Seeing no further debate, I can see there is not unanimous agreement on this. So Ms. Arrowwood, if you would take a roll call vote, what we are voting on, to be clear, is Mr. Logan's amendment, which would strike my 1/3 and leave the original number of 20% unmolested. Ms. Arrowwood, whenever you're ready.
Yes. Arrowwood, I'm going to vote no. Bracco,
No.
Sazelsky,
No keeps it at 1/3, right? I'm sorry.
No would keep my original amendment at 1/3. Yes.
I vote no.
all right. Latham,
Also no.
okay. Martin,
No.
okay. Seebeck,
No,
all right. Moulton,
No.
Logan,
Yes.
okay. And Rogers.
No,
Madam Chair, the vote is 1 yes, 8 no's. Do you care to vote?
No, I do not. So that passes. We are now back, and I could see I messed this up here. Sorry, my ADHD is getting a little weird. So we are now back to the original proposal, which is striking 20%. Well, it's the original proposal as amended, 20%, inserting 1/3, striking 5, inserting 3, striking after the adoption of the convention agenda, and inserting at each regular convention. Are there any further amendments to this proposal? Right, it did not pass. Yeah, Richard Brown, I'm sorry. I might have said something correctly. It remains at 1/3, which was my original proposal. I think Richard Brown is prodding me that I might have announced it wrong, but I think everyone understood what I meant. It's not going to be 20%. The proposal is for 1/3. Okay, so seeing no further amendments to this proposal, we are now voting to adopt this proposal as the recommendation of the committee. Because it is a final proposal, I would like a roll call vote, even though I think it might be without objection. I just would like this for the record. So Ms. Arrowwood, when you're ready, and again, what we are voting on is to recommend the changes as they're displayed on screen as the recommendation of the committee. Whenever you're ready, Madam Secretary.
Yes, Arrowwood, I vote yes. Bracco,
Yes.
Sazelsky,
Yes.
Latham,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
M- oops, and Seebeck.
yes,
All right. Moulton,
Yes.
Logan,
Yes.
Rogers.
yes,
Madam Chair, we have 9 yes, 0 no's. Do you care to vote?
Excuse me. No, thank you. So this passes and the 10-minute extension is over. So I'd like to just say where we're at, and then we will adjourn. So going to the agenda where we will take up next time, and we actually got quite a bit done this time. I have a feeling this next one is going to have some lively debate, which I welcome. We will be talking about rising seconds at our next meeting. I encourage everyone to take a look at that. And our next meeting is March 23rd. At that next meeting, I'll set up more recurring meetings for Thursday nights. I was just making sure Thursdays worked and we didn't have a bunch of days where we didn't have quorum. And so far, it has worked out. So at this point, we will be adjourned at 10:57 Eastern. But as is our custom, I would encourage any committee members to hang around if they want to have any kind of informal discussion. Also, guests can freely discuss at this point. I do ask people to raise their hand just so we keep things orderly, though we're not by any kind of Robert's rules or anything here. So I am going to stop the recording as we are adjourned, but we can hang out for a little bit if people want informal discussion.